Captain Daniel Rourke had been on many missions before, but nothing could have prepared him for Varellus 9. The planet hung like a jewel in the void, its skies painted with swirling colors he had never seen. The atmosphere shimmered faintly, as if the very air were alive. Earth's scientists had called it an alien wonder, but to Daniel, it looked like a dangerous playground. He had landed on dozens of planets with the United Earth Space Corps, but there was something different about this one, something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The mission had started smoothly. Daniel's squad of 6 soldiers was tasked with exploring a region deep in the Varellus 9 forests, mapping terrain, and collecting samples. The area was dense, filled with towering plants that glowed in faint green and blue lights. The ground was uneven, but surprisingly firm, and the air smelled sweet, like a mixture of fresh rain and honey. Yet, despite its beauty, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. They had split into pairs to cover more ground. Daniel and Sergeant Lopez had been assigned to investigate a nearby valley, which satellite scans had shown to contain strange moving energy patterns. The valley's entrance was narrow and shadowed, framed by massive, jagged rocks that shimmered as if dusted with tiny diamonds. Daniel checked his equipment carefully. His pulse quickened not out of fear, but anticipation. This was what he had trained for, the unknown. The moment they stepped into the valley, the energy readings spiked. Lights flickered along their instruments in chaotic patterns, making static hiss through their communication devices. "Stay close," Daniel said, scanning the surroundings. "Something's not right." Lopez grunted, shrugging, but followed obediently. They advanced cautiously, every step careful. The valley was beautiful, but strange, filled with floating spores that glowed faintly and drifted like tiny lanterns in the air. Without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. It started as a low vibration, barely noticeable, then grew stronger, turning into a violent shake. Rocks and debris tumbled from the cliffs above. Daniel grabbed Lopez, yanking him out of the way just as a jagged rock crashed where they had been standing. "Move!" he shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the shifting earth. They ran, dodging falling debris, sliding over the uneven terrain, and struggling to keep their balance as the valley seemed to come alive with motion. Then, the ground split open. A deep chasm formed where moments before there had been solid earth. Daniel's eyes widened as he watched the earth tear itself apart. He stumbled, catching himself on a jagged rock. Lopez had vanished into the chaos. Daniel called out, but the only response was the sound of crumbling stone and the rush of air through the widening fissure. Panic flickered in him for a brief second, but he swallowed it. Survival instincts kicked in. He had a mission, and he had to finish it alone if necessary. Daniel moved cautiously along the edge of the fissure. Every step could be his last. He had to find a safe way out. In the distance, the glowing forest seemed to stretch endlessly. It was mesmerizing, but he couldn't afford to get distracted. He was alone, and Varellus 9 was unlike any other world he had visited. The sensors on his suit showed strange fluctuations, energy readings that he could not identify. Readings that made his heart race. It was almost as if the planet itself were alive, testing him. Hours passed. Daniel navigated through the glowing forests, careful to avoid unstable terrain. Strange creatures flitted in the shadows, observing him, but never approaching. Their forms were indistinct, shifting, and translucent. He realized they might be intelligent, capable of thinking and watching, but they didn't attack. Still, every rustle made him tense. He had to find shelter before nightfall, when the temperature dropped and visibility decreased. Daniel's suit had limited power for environmental control, and if he stayed out too long, he could risk hypothermia or worse. As he pressed forward, he noticed something unusual. The energy readings on his scanner were spiking again, but in a very localized area. Daniel followed the signal carefully, trying to understand what it meant. The source appeared to be nearby. When he finally arrived, he saw a small crater-like area surrounded by strange crystalline formations. The crystals emitted a soft hum, almost musical, and Daniel felt a strange pull in his chest, as if the sound resonated inside him. He approached cautiously, careful not to touch anything that might be dangerous, and then he heard it, a faint, terrified cry. Daniel froze, scanning the area. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was high-pitched, almost musical, and carried a note of fear and desperation. He traced the sound to a cluster of fallen crystalline branches. There, tangled and struggling, was a small figure, fragile, delicate, and clearly in distress. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The child looked unlike any human he had seen. She had elongated limbs, translucent skin that shimmered in the crystal light, and large eyes that reflected the forest glow. She was tiny, maybe 6 or 7 years old in human terms. Daniel didn't hesitate. He knelt beside the child, carefully lifting the branches that trapped her. "It's okay, I've got you," he said softly. The child flinched, but didn't struggle. Daniel's medical training took over. He checked for injuries, noting cuts along her arms and bruises on her legs. "You're going to be okay," he reassured her. She looked at him with wide, luminous eyes, and Daniel felt a strange connection, as if she understood him without words. For a moment, he forgot the danger of the planet, the missing squad members, and the unstable terrain. His focus was entirely on keeping the child safe. He used a thermal blanket from his pack to wrap her gently and began moving. The child clung to him, and Daniel felt a surge of protective instinct stronger than anything he had experienced in the field. He had saved many lives in his career, but this felt different. It was personal. As they moved through the forest, Daniel kept alert. The creatures he had seen earlier observed them silently, disappearing when approached too closely. The hum of the crystals faded, replaced by the distant sounds of shifting earth and falling branches. Daniel's mind raced. How would he explain this to his command? Could he even communicate what he had found? And most importantly, what kind of species had this child come from? By nightfall, Daniel found a relatively safe area to rest. He built a small shelter using his portable gear and the natural cover of the glowing trees. The child curled beside him, and for the first time in hours, Daniel allowed himself a deep breath. His suit's sensors indicated low energy levels, both for him and the child. Daniel fed her some of the rations from his pack, noting with relief that she accepted them. She didn't speak, at least not in a way he could understand, but she seemed to respond to his presence. It was almost like she trusted him instinctively. Daniel knew he couldn't stay in one place for long. The planet was unpredictable, and staying put meant risk. But for now, he allowed a moment of calm. He thought about his squad, wondering if they had survived the quake. He thought about Earth, so far away, and about the mission that had brought him here, and he thought about the small, glowing figure beside him, whose fate now rested entirely in his hands. He realized something he hadn't expected. This mission had changed. It was no longer about exploration or data collection. It was about protecting someone who could not protect herself, a responsibility heavier than any gear or weapon he carried. As the twin moons of Virilis 9 rose in the sky, casting silver light over the forest, Daniel kept watch. He didn't know what dangers the night would bring, but he was ready. Whatever this planet threw at him, he would face it. And whatever the future held, he would not let this child suffer. Not on his watch. He drifted into a light sleep, the child in his arms, the soft hum of the forest around them. The world was strange and unknown, but Daniel felt a spark of hope. Somehow, he knew this was only the beginning and that his actions tonight would set a chain of events into motion that neither he nor anyone on Earth could have imagined. Daniel woke to the soft glow of the alien forest filtering through the thick canopy above. The twin moons of Virilis 9 had set, leaving the world bathed in a gentle silver light. The small child in his arms stirred but did not wake fully. He studied her carefully. Her delicate features seemed fragile, almost ethereal, and her luminous eyes flickered faintly, as if reflecting the forest's glow. Daniel felt a strange mixture of awe and responsibility. Protecting her was no longer just a choice, it had become an urgent mission. He stood slowly, scanning the forest was quiet, but Daniel knew better than to trust silence. On Virilis 9, danger often hid in beauty. The glowing plants that illuminated their path were mesmerizing, but they could conceal predators or unstable terrain. Every step he took was measured. The child, whom he had started to call Liara in his mind, clung instinctively to him, her small hands pressed gently against his chest. And Daniel felt an unusual warmth in his chest, a mix of care, duty, and something he couldn't quite name. Daniel knew he had to move. Staying in one place for too long was risky. He needed to find shelter that was safe, stable, and defensible. According to his maps, there was a ridge about 2 kilometers east that looked promising. He set off slowly, guiding Liara through the forest with caution. Branches glowed faintly, giving off a soft hum that vibrated lightly in the air. As they walked, Daniel noticed tiny shapes flitting among the trees. The translucent creatures he had seen yesterday were back, watching them, but they stayed hidden enough to avoid confrontation. Daniel felt their gaze on him, but he ignored it. His focus was entirely on getting Liara to safety. Hours passed as he navigated the uneven terrain. The child remained quiet, but occasionally, she would hum a faint tune. The sound was melodic, unlike anything Daniel had heard before, and for a moment, he allowed himself to be distracted. The melody seemed to resonate with the glowing plants, making the forest shimmer even more. Daniel realized the hum came not from the plants but from her, as if her voice somehow interacted with the environment. He marveled silently, wondering if this was a natural ability of her species. As the sun of Virilis 9 began to rise, the forest shifted, shadows lengthened, and faint mists began to rise from the ground. Daniel found himself near a shallow river with waters that glimmered like liquid crystal. The terrain was unstable near the riverbanks, but it offered a chance for hydration. He stopped, kneeling beside Liara, and allowed her to drink from a small container in his pack. She accepted without hesitation, her eyes never leaving his face. Daniel noticed her small fingers brushing against the water, and she smiled faintly. For a moment, he felt hope, a fleeting sense that perhaps they could survive this strange world together. Then came the sound. A low, vibrating hum, unlike any he had heard before. The plants around them seemed to react, their glow intensifying, and the air carried a faint warmth that made the hairs on his arms rise. Daniel stiffened. He motioned for Liara to stay close and advanced cautiously. The sound was rhythmic, almost deliberate, as if someone or something was calling them. The forest seemed alive, pulsing in time with the vibration. Daniel's instincts screamed caution, He had faced dangerous wildlife before, but this was different. He could feel intelligence behind the hum. Before he could react further, the ground beneath them shifted slightly. It was subtle, almost like the forest was breathing. A faint light appeared ahead, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Daniel squinted. In the distance, he saw a cluster of towering crystalline formations that seemed to rise naturally from the ground. The structures glowed softly, and Daniel realized that the rhythmic hum was coming from them. They were resonating in harmony, creating a sound that was at once beautiful and slightly unsettling. As he approached, the light intensified, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Liara pressed closer to him, her small hands gripping his armor. He felt the same pull that had drawn him to the crystals the day before, stronger this time. He knew instinctively that these structures were significant. Perhaps they were natural formations, perhaps something more. Whatever they were, they seemed to react to Liara's presence. The child stepped forward, her tiny hand reaching toward the largest crystal. The hum shifted slightly, almost like a response. Daniel's pulse quickened. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew he had to be careful. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the glow. Daniel froze, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. The figure was tall, with long, flowing limbs and translucent skin that shimmered in the light. Its eyes were large and reflective, radiating intelligence and curiosity. Daniel realized this must be one of the Elindaretha planet's dominant species. His heart raced. He had been trained for contact with alien life, but this was closer than anything he had imagined. The Elendari observed him silently, tilting its head as if studying him. Daniel felt a strange sensation, as though the creature was probing his mind without words. He swallowed hard and remained still, holding Liara protectively. Then, almost imperceptibly, the creature nodded toward the crystals. Daniel understood. The structure was important to them. Liara stepped forward again, and the creature stepped back, allowing her to move freely. Daniel realized the child had some connection with this species, something he didn't yet understand. He followed cautiously, keeping a careful eye on Liara and the Elendari figure. The path through the crystals opened into a small clearing, where more Elendari had gathered. They were silent, their forms blending with the glowing structures. In the center was a raised platform, and standing there was a figure unlike any Daniel had imagined. She radiated authority and presence, her form larger and more intricate than the others. Daniel felt his breath catch. This had to be their leader, the Elendari queen. The child ran forward, and for the first time, the queen spoke not in words, but through a soft melodic vibration that Daniel could feel in his chest. Liara responded immediately, moving to her mother's side. Daniel stood frozen, realizing that he had just guided the missing child safely to her mother. The moment was silent, but charged with intensity. The queen's gaze shifted to him. Daniel felt as though she was examining his very soul. Then came the unexpected. The queen approached, her movements graceful and deliberate. Daniel stepped back instinctively, unsure what to expect. Yet, there was no aggression in her posture. Instead, she extended a hand toward him, not in attack, but in recognition. It was as if she understood what he had done. She spoke again, the vibration soft and melodic. Daniel didn't understand the words, but he felt their meaning. Gratitude, respect, recognition. The child, Liara, looked at him with wide, luminous eyes. For a brief moment, Daniel saw a spark of joy in her expression, a silent thank you. He realized he had done more than protect her from physical harm. He had restored her safety and brought her back to her family. The feeling was overwhelming. Daniel's chest tightened with emotion he couldn't describe. He had never thought of himself as a hero, but in this moment, he understood the importance of his actions. That as the sun of Viralis 9 rose higher, casting warm light over the crystal structures, Daniel realized that his mission had changed. It was no longer about exploration, data collection, or even survival. It was about connection between species, between life forms, and between the unknown and the familiar. He had acted instinctively, driven by a simple human desire to protect the vulnerable. Now, he was facing the consequences of that choice, and the outcome was beyond anything he had imagined. Daniel knew that this encounter was only the beginning. The Elendari were intelligent, highly advanced, and clearly capable of understanding complex actions and intentions. If they had recognized his bravery, it was likely that his life and perhaps the future of his people would be affected in ways he could not yet foresee. And yet, he felt no fear, only determination. He had saved Liara, and he would continue to protect her if needed. Whatever challenges awaited, Daniel was ready. For now, he allowed himself a moment to observe the Elendari queen and the child. The queen's presence was commanding yet serene. Liara clung to her mother briefly before looking back at Daniel with a small smile. In that moment, he understood something fundamental. Trust could exist even between species separated by light years and differences, and that trust could be powerful enough to shape destinies. As the day progressed, Daniel remained vigilant. The Elendari observed him closely, but there was no hostility, only curiosity and awareness. He realized that he had entered a world far more complex than he had imagined, a world where actions mattered, where courage and compassion could bridge the gap between two very different species. And as he walked beside Liara and the Elendari toward the heart of the crystal forest, Daniel understood one undeniable truth. The story of this planet and of his life had changed forever. Daniel followed closely as Liara led him through the glowing forest. The alien plants swayed gently, casting soft light across the crystalline paths. Each step was mesmerizing, yet Daniel remained alert. He had learned early on that beauty on Varelis 9 often hid danger, but there was something different about this place. It felt safe. The Illendari were everywhere, their translucent forms drifting silently among the glowing trees. None of them threatened him. Instead, they observed. Their eyes held intelligence, awareness, and, most surprisingly, calm. Liara moved with a fluid grace, her small feet making no sound on the uneven ground. Daniel noticed how the Illendari seemed to part before her, creating a subtle path. He realized that she was recognized among them, not just as a child, but as someone important. Every time she glanced back at him, there was a spark in her eyes, a silent assurance that he was still welcome. Daniel's chest tightened with pride and responsibility. He had saved her. But it was clear that his actions had consequences far beyond what he could yet imagine. After some time, they reached a wide clearing, and Daniel's jaw dropped. Towering crystalline structures rose from the ground like frozen waterfalls. They glimmered with soft colors that shifted from blue to green to gold, casting a radiant glow across the entire area. In the center stood a raised platform made of the same crystal material, polished and glowing as if infused with energy. Standing on the platform was a figure Daniel could only describe as majestic. The Illendari queen was unlike anything he had ever seen. She was tall, her elongated form shimmering with colors that seemed to change with every movement. Her eyes were enormous, reflecting the glowing forest like mirrors. She moved with a grace that was both commanding and gentle, radiating an energy that Daniel could feel in his chest. The air itself seemed to hum in response to her presence. Liara ran forward and leaped into her mother's embrace. Daniel watched silently, unsure what to do. The queen's gaze shifted toward him, and he froze. Her eyes were fixed on him, not with anger or suspicion, but with deep curiosity. He felt an unspoken question pass through the air, as if she could sense his thoughts. Daniel swallowed hard. He had faced alien species before, but never like this. The queen's presence was overwhelming, yet he did not feel fear only awe. A soft vibration passed through the clearing. It was the Illendari way of speaking, not with words, but through resonance. Daniel felt it in his chest, in his head, and even in his fingertips. He could not understand it, yet the tone was clear. Acknowledgement, recognition, gratitude. Lyra responded immediately, pressing closer to her mother. Daniel realized that this queen was the one who had lost her daughter, and he had returned her safely. He felt a swell of pride and relief. Mixed with nervous anticipation, the queen moved closer to him, her steps silent against the crystal platform. Daniel instinctively straightened, unsure whether to bow, speak, or remain still. Her eyes scanned him slowly, deliberately. Daniel's training kicked in military discipline, situational awareness, but nothing could prepare him for the intensity of this moment. The queen reached out with one hand, not in threat, but as if inviting him forward. He took a cautious step. Liara looked at him, her luminous eyes shining, then returned to her mother. Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had saved her life, and now he stood before the most powerful being he had ever encountered. The clearing was silent, except for the soft hum of the crystals, which seemed to resonate with the queen's presence. Suddenly, a wave of understanding passed through him. The Illendari did not speak as humans do. They communicated through resonance, emotion, and subtle telepathic cues. Daniel realized that the queen was aware of his thoughts, his intentions, and the depth of his care for Lee. He had expected distrust, perhaps even hostility, but instead, he felt something entirely unexpected: trust. The queen extended both hands, palms open, and a soft glow emanated from her fingertips. Daniel felt a rush of energy wash over him, not painful, but invigorating. Images flashed in his mind, scenes of the forest, of the child's capture, and then of Daniel lifting her from the fallen crystalline branches. The queen had seen everything. She knew he had acted without hesitation, without thinking of his own safety. He had saved her daughter purely out of compassion. A ripple of acknowledgement spread through the surrounding Ellen. They moved in harmony, forming a silent circle around the platform. Daniel realized he was being observed not as an intruder, but as a participant in something sacred. He felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. This was not just a meeting, it was a judgment, and somehow he felt it was fair. Lyara's small hand pressed against his arm, grounding him. He looked down at her and saw the gratitude shining in her eyes. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. He had no idea what the queen would decide, but he knew that he had done the right thing. And somehow, he sensed that this simple act of saving a child had changed everything. The queen's resonance shifted, slower and deeper now. Daniel felt her intentions clearly. She was offering him recognition, but also a choice. The surrounding Illendari echoed the vibrations, amplifying the message. It was clear Daniel had acted selflessly, and now the queen was granting him an audience that few outsiders ever received. Daniel's mind raced. What could she want from him? Why involve a human in matters of her people? He remained silent, keeping his posture neutral. Any sudden movement or expression could be misinterpreted. The queen approached the edge of the platform and gestured toward the surrounding forest. Images and sensations flooded Daniel's mind. The history of the Illindari, their society, their values, and most importantly, their care for their young. He understood that Liara was precious to them, not just as an individual, but as a symbol of their continuity. Daniel realized something important. His actions had not only saved a life, but had demonstrated a rare quality: compassion without expectation. In a world where most beings judged outsiders immediately, he had acted purely from instinct, and the Illindari, it seemed, valued such qualities above all else. The queen stepped closer, and Daniel could feel the subtle shift in her energy. She did not speak as humans do, but her resonance conveyed a sense of calm, authority. Daniel understood this was a pivotal moment. How he responded would determine not only his fate, but perhaps the relationship between humans and the Illindari. He nodded slightly, signaling respect. Lyra's tiny hand pressed against his chest, as if encouraging him. Daniel took a deep breath, centering himself. Whatever was coming, he would face it with honesty and integrity. He had no weapons drawn, no hidden motives, only the desire to protect and do what was right. The queen extended her hand once more, this time in a gesture that Daniel could recognize as an invitation to step onto the platform. With Lyra still nearby, Daniel carefully stepped forward. The Illindari on either side moved aside, forming a pathway that seemed to guide him naturally. The crystals beneath his feet hummed softly, resonating with each step he took. Once on the platform, Daniel stood facing the queen directly. She tilted her head slightly, observing him with patience. Liara stood close to her mother, glancing at Daniel with a quiet smile. The resonance shifted, now carrying an almost imperceptible tension. Daniel understood that the queen was considering something significant. He felt it in the vibrations around him, the weight of a decision that could change everything. Then, finally, the queen reached out, her hand hovering near his chest. The sensation was electric, not painful, but powerful. Daniel felt a connection, a silent acknowledgement of his bravery, his integrity, and his compassion. The resonance conveyed more than words could. She trusted him. She recognized him not just as a human soldier, but as someone capable of great responsibility. Daniel realized he had crossed a threshold. He was no longer merely an outsider. He had been accepted, at least partially, into their world. The implications were enormous. He could feel the eyes of the Illindari upon him, and though he could not fully understand their thoughts, he sensed respect, curiosity, and cautious hope. The queen's resonance shifted again, this time carrying an unmistakable weight of decision. Daniel's heart pounded. He had no idea what would come next, but he understood that whatever the queen intended, it would be let. And then, in a way that transcended language, he understood the message clearly. He had a choice, one that would test his courage, his morality, and his willingness to step into the unknown. As the soft hum of the crystals filled the clearing, Daniel knew that nothing about this moment was ordinary. Every choice, every action, and every heartbeat carried significance. And in that quiet, glowing forest, standing before a being of immense power and grace, Daniel felt a surge of determination. He would face whatever came next with courage. He had already saved a life, and now, he was about to step into a destiny far greater than anything he had imagined. Daniel stood on the crystalline platform, the Illindari queen's gaze fixed upon him. The glowing forest around them hummed softly, the resonance from the crystals filling the air with a low, melodic vibration. For a long moment, he did nothing, unsure of what was coming next. He had expected gratitude, perhaps a polite acknowledgement of his actions, but there was something heavier here. The queen's presence was magnetic, commanding, and full of intent. Every vibration he felt in the air seemed to carry meaning, and Daniel realized he was being carefully studied, not just as a human, but as a being capable of choice, courage, and compassion. Liara stood close to her mother, her tiny hand brushing against the queen's robe. Daniel's heart swelled as he looked at her. He had saved her life, returned her safely to her family, and now he was standing before the most powerful being on this alien world. And yet, he had no idea what the queen intended. The forest was silent, except for the gentle hum of the crystals, which seemed to pulse in harmony with the queen's energy. The moment felt sacred, almost timeless. Then the queen moved closer. Her elongated form shimmered, colors shifting gently across her translucent skin. She did not speak in words, yet Daniel felt her meaning clearly through the vibrations in the air. She was offering acknowledgement, respect, and more, something far greater than mere gratitude. Daniel's mind raced. What could this mean? Humans had never been welcomed into the inner circles of the Illindari, let alone honored by their queen. He kept his posture respectful, standing tall and still. Liara looked up at him, her eyes shining, as if silently encouraging him to remain calm. Daniel had faced countless dangers in his career as a soldier, from firefights to natural disasters, but nothing had prepared him for this. Here, on a distant alien world, he felt the full weight of his actions. The choice he had made to protect a small, defenseless child had led him to this moment. The queen's resonance shifted again, slower now, carrying a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten. He felt the vibrations deep within him, as if the forest itself was speaking through her. Images and feelings passed into his mind: the child's vulnerability, the peril of the planet, the courage it had taken to act without hesitation. The queen had observed everything. She knew his intentions, his fears, his bravery, and she had made a decision. Daniel understood. Even before the vibrations reached their peak, the queen was offering him something extraordinary. The Elendari did not make such gestures lightly. Their culture valued courage, empathy, and loyalty above all else. And here he was, a human, being recognized for these very qualities. He could hardly believe it. For centuries, humans and Elendari had been separated by distance, distrust, and difference. Yet here he stood, the first human in memory to receive such acknowledgement. The queen extended her hand toward him, a gesture of invitation. Daniel felt a surge of energy as he stepped closer. The crystals beneath the platform seemed to resonate in response, glowing brighter as if amplifying the significance of the moment. He realized that this was more than a personal acknowledgement, it was an opportunity. The queen was offering him a place among her people, a role that few outsiders had ever been given. Daniel's mind raced. What would it mean to accept such an offer? He had trained his whole life to serve humanity, to protect his people, and now he was being asked to step into the world of another species entirely. The implications were enormous. Accepting could change the course of human-Elendari relations forever. It could also mean leaving everything he knew behind Earth, his family, his friends, and his fellow soldiers. And yet, he could see the potential for good, for understanding, for bridging the gap between two worlds that had never truly connected. Liara looked at him again, her small hand lifting slightly in what felt like encouragement. Daniel realized that she had not only survived because of him, but had also become the bridge between him and the Elendari. Her safety had brought him to this moment, and now her presence seemed to guide his decision. He drew a deep breath, steadying himself. He had faced impossible choices before, but none carried the weight of this one. The queen's resonance grew more intense, filling the clearing with a sense of anticipation. Daniel could feel the eyes of the surrounding Elendari upon him, their forms shimmering in the crystal light. They were watching not just to see what he would do, but to understand what his presence meant for their world. The weight of history pressed upon him, yet he remained focused. He had acted with courage once, and now he would act again, not with a weapon, but with his heart and his mind. A wave of emotion washed over him as he realized the depth of what was being offered. The queen was not asking him to fight, nor was she demanding loyalty in the way he had known as a soldier. She was offering partnership, trust, and a role that could shape the future. Daniel understood that to accept meant more than personal honor, it meant responsibility. It meant standing as a representative of humanity among the Elendari, protecting both worlds and nurturing understanding. He glanced at Liara again. She smiled faintly, her luminous eyes full of innocence and hope. Daniel felt a surge of determination. He had saved her life, and now he had a chance to continue protecting her and her people in a way that no human ever had. The fear and uncertainty that had filled him earlier began to fade, replaced by a sense of purpose. This was no longer about survival, it was about making a difference, about stepping into a role that could change everything. The queen extended her hand once more, and Daniel took it. The moment the connection was made, a warm energy pulsed through him, filling him with a sense of unity and understanding. He felt as though he could sense the thoughts of the Elendari, not in words, but in emotions and intentions. He understood their values, their hopes, and their fears. And in return, he felt that they understood him not just as a human, but as someone capable of bridging two worlds. Daniel's mind was clear. The decision was made. He would accept the offer, not out of desire for recognition, but out of commitment to protect and serve, just as he had when he saved Liara. He had been given an extraordinary opportunity, and he would honor it with everything he had. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it did not intimidate him. Instead, it inspired him. The queen's resonance softened, and the surrounding Elendari relaxed. Daniel realized that his acceptance had been understood, acknowledged, and welcomed. The clearing seemed to brighten, the crystals humming with a sense of celebration. Liara ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. Daniel hugged her carefully, feeling a warmth that went beyond physical touch. He had saved her life, and now he would continue to protect her, her people, and the fragile connection between humans and Elendari for a long moment. Daniel simply stood there, surrounded by the glowing forest, the crystalline structures, and the presence of beings unlike any he had ever known. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, but he had also found courage, purpose, and connection. The Elendari Queen's offer was not just a reward, it was a responsibility, a trust, and an opportunity to shape the future. As the twin moons of Veralis 9 rose once more, casting silver light across the crystal platform, Daniel felt a quiet resolve. He had chosen a path that would be difficult, challenging, and full of unknowns, but it was the right path. He would honor the trust placed in him, nurture the bond between species, and continue to act with courage and compassion. The queen stepped back slightly, her luminous eyes meeting his. Daniel bowed slightly, a gesture of respect and gratitude. The resonance shifted again, softer this time, carrying warmth and approval. Daniel understood that this was only the beginning, that the journey ahead would be long, complex, and full of challenges. But he was ready. He had faced impossible situations before, and now he would face this new world with the same determination that had guided him. Throughout his life, Liara smiled up at him once more, and Daniel returned the smile, feeling a sense of hope and purpose he had never known. He had saved a life, gained the trust of a powerful alien race, and stepped into a destiny far greater than he could have imagined. The forest hummed around them, the crystals pulsing with gentle light, and Daniel knew that this moment would stay with him forever. Reminder that courage, compassion, and selflessness could transcend worlds and create bonds that nothing could break. Daniel stepped down from the crystalline platform, his mind still buzzing from the incredible events that had just unfolded. He had accepted the Elendari Queen's offer, though the full meaning of it was only beginning to sink in. A role among the Elendari was unlike anything a human could imagine, an opportunity filled with responsibility, trust, and the potential to shape the future of two worlds. And yet, standing there beside Liara, he felt a sense of calm determination. This was where he was meant to be, at least for now. Liara ran ahead, her small feet barely making a sound against the glowing forest floor. Daniel followed slowly, careful not to trip on the uneven terrain. Every step he took felt significant. The Elendari who had been observing him moved aside, forming a silent path through the forest. Daniel noticed the way the creatures' translucent bodies shimmered as they passed, their colors shifting subtly in response to his presence. It was as if the forest itself was acknowledging his acceptance and readiness. The queen walked ahead with Liara, her movements fluid and graceful. Daniel studied her carefully, realizing that her leadership was not only about power but also about understanding, empathy, and connection. The bond between mother and child was evident, and Daniel felt honored to have played a role in safeguarding it. He had never experienced anything like this, not in his life on Earth and not even in his military career. This was a connection that transcended worlds, one built on trust, courage, and care. As they walked, Daniel tried to understand what his new role would entail. The queen had been clear. He would serve as a protector, an advisor, and a bridge between the Elendari and humans. He would need to learn their ways, understand their culture, and navigate challenges that humans had never faced before. It was a daunting task, but Daniel felt ready. He had survived countless missions on Earth and beyond, but this was different. This was not just about survival, it was about responsibility on a scale he could hardly comprehend. The forest began to open up into a wide valley filled with towering crystal spires. Sunlight tore what passed for sunlight on Varelis 9 filtered through the atmosphere, casting brilliant patterns on the ground. Daniel marveled at the beauty, but he also remained alert. This world, as wondrous as it was unpredictable. The Elendari moved confidently, but Daniel knew that adapting to their environment would take time and patience. Every plant, every shimmer, and every creature could carry surprises. Liara stopped suddenly, turning back to Daniel. Her eyes shone with excitement as she gestured toward a path leading deeper into the valley. Daniel smiled softly, following her lead. The child seemed to understand more about this world than he did, and he realized that she would be his guide in more ways than one. She had survived here before, and now she was introducing him to the deeper parts of her world. As they approached the center of the valley, Daniel noticed groups of Elendari engaged in various activities. Some were tending to glowing plants, others were communicating through resonance in patterns that were mesmerizing to watch. It was clear that their society was organized, cooperative, and harmonious. Daniel felt a sense of awe and humility. He had always known humans were capable of greatness, but here was an entirely different civilization, advanced not through conflict but through understanding and cooperation. The queen stopped at the edge of a crystal plaza. Daniel followed, sensing that this was a significant place. The plaza was filled with luminous patterns etched into the ground, glowing softly and pulsing in rhythm with the surrounding crystal formations. He felt a strange warmth as he stepped onto it, as if the plaza itself recognized his presence. The queen turned to him, her eyes reflecting the light of the valley. Through resonance, he understood that this was a place of learning and ceremony, a place where decisions were made, wisdom was shared, and the future was shaped. Daniel realized that he was about to begin his training not just in protecting Leia, but in understanding the Elendari, their culture, and their ways. The queen's offer was more than a role. It was a lifetime of learning, responsibility, and growth. And though the challenge was immense, Daniel felt ready. He had always relied on his instincts, courage, and commitment to others. Now, he would expand those skills in ways he had never imagined. Over the following days, Daniel began to learn the rhythms of Elendari life. He studied their patterns of communication, slowly understanding how resonance could convey thoughts and feelings far more precisely than words. He observed their interactions, noting the emphasis on trust, empathy, and cooperation. Every lesson was a revelation. Humans often relied on words, gestures, and logic, but the Elendari's way of understanding the world was different, intuitive, and deeply emotional. Daniel felt both challenged and inspired. Liara was his constant companion during this time. She seemed to intuitively understand when he needed guidance, and her presence reminded him why he had accepted the queen's offer. He watched her laugh and play with other young Illendari, realizing that her safety and happiness depended on his continued vigilance and support. And yet, he also began to see her as a teacher, showing him the subtleties of her world in ways that the queen could not. One evening, Daniel stood on a high ridge overlooking the valley. The crystal spires glowed softly beneath the twin moons, casting long, shimmering reflections across the landscape. He felt a quiet sense of peace, though he knew his responsibilities were far from over. The queen approached silently, her presence calm yet commanding. She extended her hand in a gesture of reassurance, and Daniel felt the familiar warmth of resonance flow through him. Through this connection, he understood her message clearly. The future would not be easy, but it was worth striving for. The queen trusted him, the Illendari trusted him, and Liara depended on him. And in that moment, Daniel realized that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a human soldier from Earth. He was a guardian, a bridge, and a participant in a story that spanned worlds. The queen's resonance shifted slightly, conveying approval and pride. Daniel felt a deep sense of honor. He had been given a rare opportunity, one that required courage, empathy, and dedication. And though he had doubts at times, he now knew that he was capable of meeting the challenge. His heart swelled with purpose. He had found a mission greater than any he had faced before. As days turned into weeks, Daniel adapted further. He learned to navigate the alien terrain with confidence, communicate through resonance with the Illendari, and anticipate the needs of Liara. He became more than an observer. He became part of their world, and yet, he never forgot Earth or his roots. He carried both worlds within him, the familiarity of home and the wonder of the unknown. Daniel realized that his presence had begun to influence others as well. The Illendari who had initially been cautious around him now moved freely in his presence, acknowledging him with subtle gestures and resonance patterns. He felt a growing sense of community, a bond built not through words, but through shared experiences, mutual respect, and trust. And in this bond, Daniel found a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. One evening, as he walked with Liara through a grove of glowing trees, the child paused and looked up at him. Her eyes reflected the soft light of the crystals, and she reached for his hand. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest. He had saved her life, but now he realized that she had given him something equally important: purpose. She had shown him the meaning of courage, compassion, and responsibility in a way that no mission, no battle, and no training could ever teach. The Illendari queen approached quietly, her presence as serene as ever. Daniel turned to her, standing tall and confident. He felt the weight of his journey behind him and the promise of the future ahead. Through the subtle resonance of her energy, he understood that she, too, recognized the transformation he had undergone. He was no longer a visitor. He was a trusted member of their world. And in that acknowledgement, Daniel found a sense of peace, determination, and readiness. As the twin moons of Varelis 9 rose high in the sky, casting silver light over the glowing valley, Daniel felt a profound sense of connection. He had begun as a soldier facing danger and uncertainty, but he had become something more: a guardian, a bridge between worlds, and a symbol of trust and courage. And though the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, he knew that he was prepared to meet them. Standing beside Liara and the queen, Daniel looked out over the glowing valley and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given an extraordinary opportunity, one that required responsibility, empathy, and courage, and he had accepted it. The forest hummed softly around them, the crystals pulsing gently as if in harmony with his thoughts and intentions. Daniel understood that this moment was not the end. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one in which humans and Illendari could learn, grow, and protect each other in ways they had never imagined. For the first time since arriving on Varelis 9, Daniel felt truly at home, not on Earth, not in a military base, but here, in this glowing alien world, standing among beings he had once thought unreachable. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, but he had also discovered courage, connection, and purpose. And as he looked at Liara, her small hand clasped in his, he knew that together, they would face whatever came next with bravery, compassion, and trust.